Welcome back to Police Academy Prep. This is Deputy Z, and today we will be going through the Law Enforcement Basic Recruit Book of the Police Academy, going into Chapter 1, Introduction to Law Enforcement. This will be the short edition recorded version, where it breezes through the bold and highlighted points and terms in the chapter to provide a more streamlined recap. Be sure to watch the in-depth recording version, where I read from the entire chapter. I provide more insight, more test questions to fully prepare you. So let's go ahead and jump into the material here. Law enforcement is a service-oriented profession. That is definitely a test question. Know that. An officer's customer is the public, and you will spend a majority of your time on tasks like assisting a driver, flat tire, helping someone on the side of the road, business owners, etc. All right. To accomplish all these tasks, an officer should be service-oriented, dependable, and communicative, a problem solver, and a multitasker. Know that because that's also a possible test question there. Law enforcement officers are expected to perform a variety of duties and adapt to multiple roles. Those roles are going to be supporter, stabilizer, and enforcer. Know these roles inside and out. They will ask probably a question on each, and they probably will ask questions inside the paragraphs here. So we'll quickly breeze through these. Supporter is a role you should automatically adopt. Know that. Automatically adopt when interacting with your community. As a supporter, you will help people who are grieving, hurt, or experiencing a personal tragedy. Here are some examples. Calming a lost child, helping a confused person with Alzheimer's, or interview someone who has gone through severe trauma. Another important aspect of this role is learning how you can best support your community. We'll move on to stabilizer here. Actually, before I go a little too further, I just released a new test-taking platform. I am working on creating practice tests for every chapter in the book for both books. So at the end of this video, look down in the description. You'll see a link to where you can sign up. Click that link, create a quick account, and then you'll have access to a whole bunch of practice tests. So I created these tests from the material, and they mirror what your chapter test should look like. What I also did is a portion of the questions, about 20 to 30% of all the questions in those practice tests are going to be scenario based, more similar to what you'd expect to see on the SOCE to kind of help you also prepare for the SOCE. So go check those tests out. I made a 50 question test and 200 question tests to really just prepare you. So you don't need to take the 50 question test if you're going to take the 200 question test, because it's going to include all the same questions. But if you do take that 200 question test and you pass it with good grades, I would expect you to pass on your chapter test pretty well, because it's going to be all the same material that we're going over right now. So let's jump back in. So the next role is stabilizer. When critical incidents occur, you'll need to display confidence and calm those around you. So that is a stabilizer. You're displaying confidence and you're calming people. Maintaining your composure and displaying confidence in your capabilities are important to this role. You will help people to remain calm. You'll guide them through the confusion, bring order to uncontrolled situations. Some examples would be disaster recovery and responding to the scene of a traffic crash. Know those examples for the test. Enforcer role represents duties that are typically associated with law enforcement officer, making arrests, maintaining order, giving lawful commands. Those are a few examples. You need to be assertive, get orders rather than ask questions. There will be times when you play the role of the enforcer, but the majority of your time will be spent as the supporter and the stabilizer. So not to confusion here, but know this for the test. You will automatically adopt the supporter role, but for the majority of your time, you will be both supporter and stabilizer. So know that for the test. Shifting roles, that's basically talking about being able to shift. If you're on a scene, you'll shift from supporter to, enforcer, or stabilizer back to supporter, etc. All right, emotional intelligence. Someone who has emotional intelligence has the ability to identify and cope with their own emotions while also doing the same for other people around them. Officers who have greater emotional intelligence more easily recognize when to take on and switch roles. Okay, just know that emotional intelligence doesn't mean you suppress your emotions. It just means you recognize them, cope with them, and also help other people. Do know that emotional intelligence is a skill that can help you be a better officer. So know that that'll probably be a test question as well. They're going to say, which one is a skill that helps you be a better officer? It's going to be emotional intelligence. All right, here we go. Strengthening your emotional intelligence and recognizing the roles that you assume as an officer will help in the ultimate goal of service. Each time you put on the role of uniform, you assume the societal position of a law enforcement officer, and this is a position that gives you the authority and power to enforce the law. All right, we're going to move on to the next unit here. All right, the Criminal Justice Standards and Training Commissions, that is the CJSTC, Make sure you know that for the test, and you'll probably have more questions on other chapters of that. So just know what the CJSDC is. That is a Criminal Justice Standards and Training Commission. It was established with the mission to do what? Ensure that qualified, competent, and ethical criminal justice officers serve the residents and visitors of Florida. In pursuit of these goals, the CJSDC is committed to delivering quality standards and training, as well as increasing the professionalism of officers throughout the state. Know this as well for the test. The CJSDC is responsible for overseeing the certification, employment, training, maintenance of officer records, and overall conduct of all criminal justice officers in the state of Florida. The Florida statutes appoint the Criminal Justice Professionalism Division, the CJP, within the FDLE, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, to support and assist the work of the CJSDC. I'm not going to go into super depth with these. Just remember on the extended long version recording, I do go into more depth explaining. So, like I said, for this one is a short edition. I'm just going to kind of breeze through here. All right, to become a law enforcement officer, you must follow a training and certification process outlined by the FAC, the Florida Statutes and the Florida Administrative Code. So the FAC is the Florida Administrative Code. Know that for the test. Know the steps to complete the basic training program. 80% score on all the tests. Proficiency in DUI, proficiency in high liability, and participate in the physical fitness program. Then we have the SOCE, the State Officer Certification Exam. You must pass that within 3 attempts. Know that for the test. If you do not pass within 3 attempts, you'll have to retake the entire basic recruit training. That'll probably also be on your test there as well. So 3 times, and then what happens if you don't pass 3? You have to do the academy all over again. Officer certification. Okay, to become certified as a sworn law enforcement officer, you must complete the following. Meet all the minimum requirements and standards, complete the approved basic recruit training, pass the state exam, and then, don't forget this part, in order to be fully certified, you have to be actively employed with a law enforcement agency in a full-time, part-time, or auxiliary sworn position. You have 4 years, know that number, 4 years from the starting date of your academy to complete the certification process, not from the date when you pass the SOCE. For example, if you begin the basic recruit training on July 1st, of whatever year you're in, you must meet all the minimum requirements and standards, complete the basic recruit training, pass the SOCE, become actively employed by June 30th, 4 years from that date. So let's just say, for example, we're in 2030, July 1st of 2030. You have 4 years, so then it would be June 30th of 2034. So again, in the test, they'll try to trick you up. What they'll say is, oh, July 1st to July 1st 4 years ago. No, that's technically 4 years in 1 day, so know that for the test. That's a big one that got a lot of people. If it's on July 1st, then exactly 4 years later is going to be June 30th, which is a day before, right? So just keep that in mind. All right, officer compliance and discipline. So the CJSDC is the one disciplining you. They're the one that holds your certification, right, as we discussed earlier. Here are some things that they can discipline you on. Pleads no contendere, which is a person does not accept or deny responsibility for the charges but agrees to accept punishment. Know that for the test. In regards to this list, I wouldn't say you need to memorize this list, but when you get to the test and you get a question saying which one of these could the CJSTC punish you on, I mean, they're all just bad. So when you look at your option, use common sense, use deduction and reasoning, and be like, all right, which one's the bad one here? Okay, that's the bad one. So obviously that's the one that they're going to say is the one that they're going to punish you on. So again, nolo contendere, or if you found guilty of perjury or false statement, failed to have good moral character, anything with a felony offense, anything with a misdemeanor. So any crime at all, I'm just going to cut to the chase, any crime at all, they could discipline you on depending. Any act that out of the state, that if you were in the state would be criminal, test positive for drugs, excessive use of force, sexual harassment, misuse of official position, engages in sex on duty, unprofessional relationship with inmate, detainee, probation or parolee, or community controllee. Let's see here. Any physical contact that is not normally associated with the demonstration of affection or sexual misconduct, and making false statements during the employment process. If you attempt to subvert, if you basically try to cheat on the SOCE, if you try to cheat during the academy, etc. Here are the things that the CJSDC can discipline you with. So 1, a written reprimand, probation of up to 2 years, suspension of up to 2 years, and revocation of your certification entirely. But do know for the test that under Florida law, the CJSDC must, they don't have an option, the other ones are options, but they must revoke your certification if you're convicted of, plead guilty, or nolo contendere to, or found guilty of any felony offense, even if it's withholding of adjudication or suspension of sentence. Okay, just know that in the academy, they're going to expect you to adhere to those same standards. And that could also be a small test question they'll slip in there. All right, now we're moving on to the structure of the criminal justice system. So the system of criminal justice involves the maintenance and enforcement of criminal laws and includes the structures, functions, and decision-making process of the agencies that deal with the management and control of crime and criminal offenders. I would know that sentence. Criminal justice, that question is going to be on the test. Know the three main components of the criminal justice system. That is law enforcement, court system, and corrections. So know those three. We're going to get to law enforcement agencies. We're going to have local, municipal, county, state, and federal. So local, they enforce ordinances of the municipality. So police departments, public safety departments. Then you have county law enforcement agencies such as sheriff's departments. They handle county ordinances and state laws. Then we have state law enforcement agencies such as Florida Highway Patrol and FDLE. They enforce the obviously state laws. And then you have federal law enforcement agencies such as FBI, Immigration and Customs, and they enforce federal laws across state lines. Then we have corrections. So you have corrections, you have county jails, juvenile assessment centers, prisons, and probation and parole. So county jails, that is a year or less, so 365 days or less. That'll probably be a test question. They'll probably try to trick you. They'll say, oh, if I sentence someone to 2 years, are they going to jail or prison? Just remember the jail is 365 days or less. Or they'll try to be even trickier and say 366 days, right? And you know at that point that becomes prison, not county jail. Juvenile assessment centers know that a juvenile is someone who is younger than 18. Prison, that is federal and state. So remember, county jails are county. Think sheriff's office. Prisons are federal and state correctional institutions. So if you're sentenced to prison, if you're sentenced to longer than a year, you're going to prison. You're not going to jail. Nobody in jail has stayed there longer than a year. Then we have probation and parole. Those are alternatives to incarceration. Do know the difference between these two. That's going to be important. They will be on the test and probably in a few ways, and they'll try to trip you up. Probation is a sentence placing a person under the supervision of probation for a specific length of time instead of confinement. So they don't go to jail. So if they're like, you know what, you're not going to jail, you're getting 2 years probation, boom. Parole, on the other hand, is you're in prison. Let's say you were sentenced to 5 years. You've been in there 3, but you have good behavior. The last 2 years, they're going to say, you know what, we're going to give him parole, we're going to release him, and he's going to finish his sentence on parole outside of prison. So remember, parole is they're already in prison and they're getting out early. Probation, they're not going anywhere. They're not going to jail, they're not going to prison. They're just getting probation. Then we have levels of criminal involvement. At the top, we're going to have a person of interest. Then we're going to flow to either a witness, a subject, or a victim. From the subject, you're going to then become a suspect or detainee, then an arrestee, a defendant, and then an offender. Do know that, well, don't confuse subject and suspect. Those are going to be different. So you become a subject first, subject of the crime, then you become the suspect or the detainee. So a little description here. A suspect is a person who is believed to have committed a crime. A detainee is a person who is taken into custody and not free to leave the scene. An arrestee is a person who goes from subject to arrestee when they are arrested for a crime. A defendant, a person becomes a defendant once they're formally charged with a crime in a court proceeding. And then an offender, a person is an offender once they are convicted of the crime by a court of law. So don't confuse defendant and offender. Defendant means, well, let's go about this. When you're accused of a crime by a law enforcement officer, you're going to be an arrestee. When you're accused of a crime in court, you're a defendant. And when you're actually convicted and getting sentenced in court, you then become an offender. Then we have a complainant is a person who reports a crime or alleges that a crime has been committed. A witness, any person who has information about some element of the crime or about evidence or documents related to the crime. A victim, a person or entity that suffers an injury as a result of the crime. It doesn't have to be physical. It could be loss of money, loss of property, damage to property. Not all crimes have an individual crime. You can have multiple crimes, or the state could be the victim. You can have multiple victims, or the state could be the victim. Confidential source, a person who provides information and confidence about a crime. Person of interest, someone involved in a criminal investigation who has not been arrested or formally accused of a crime. So, they may be the one who did it, or they may be a witness. They're just a person of interest. A person of interest could be anybody. A witness, victim, suspect, etc. A subject, we went through that, is a person accused or suspected of committing a crime, and a suspect is a person believed to have committed the crime. So know the difference between accused and believed. Those are the key words here. So accused or suspected is subject, and then believed, which means it's like, all right, that's them, that becomes now the suspect. So those are kind of the key words, accused and believed. So accused is subject, believed is suspect. All right, chain of command is the order of authority within an organization. It provides the links of authority and responsibility that join one level to another. Your rank, know your rank kind of briefly. They're probably going to be a test question of it, but it's usually not going to be super complex, so I wouldn't memorize them. Just, you kind of know, right? The sheriff chief is at the top, and then it moves down to undersheriff, deputy chief, colonel, major, captain, lieutenant, sergeant, corporal, and then at the bottom, deputy officer or trooper. Let's see here. Chain of command. Following a chain of command enhances an agency's efficiency through coordinating communication channels and reducing confusion. Vertical communication is a term of, it's for information movement from the agency head that flows down. So think vertical is up and down, right? So it's either going up or down. Generally it's going down, but it can go up. So that's vertical communication. Lateral, think like horizontal, sideways. So from officer to officer, sergeant to sergeant, etc. Do know that, you as an officer can't just jump to your lieutenant. You're supposed to go to your sergeant, and then your sergeant goes to the lieutenant, the lieutenant goes back to your sergeant, who comes back to you. That's your vertical communication. All right, insubordination. Know that for the test, it can be violating the chain of command is insubordination. It can be a serious violation that is often the result of failing to follow orders. Delegation of authority will be on the test, so do know that. Let's see here. Do know that the consequences of everything that happens within the organization ultimately rests on one person. That will be on the test. So whether it's your chief of police, whether it's your sheriff, technically everything falls on one person. All right, so to effectively manage an organization, the person in command needs to assign decision-making authority to those under their command. When a person with authority grants decision-making authority to another person, it is called the delegation of authority. So it's like your sheriff telling your major, hey, you're in charge of SWAT, right? Or you're in charge of this unit, you're in charge of that. They're delegating authority. All right, let's see here. All right, procedural justice. Definitely test question. You'll see this on this chapter and other chapters, so just get that ingrained in you now. Is an approach that focuses on carrying out justice in a fair and equitable manner. All right, here, let's see some other. We got the 4 pillars that compose procedural justice. Fairness, and so with these 4, unfortunately, you're going to kind of have to memorize them, but they are kind of self-explanatory and they do explain themselves. So if they give the definition, let's say, of fairness and consistency of rule of application, the first thing it says is the perception of fairness. So obviously that's the fairness one. So it is kind of common sense, but do know the 4 of these here. So fairness and consistency of rule of application is the perception of fairness is not just about the outcome. Be consistent in your decision making and treat people with respect. The second one is voice and representation of the process. It involves groups and the decisions that affect them and listening to their concerns. 3, transparency and openness of the process. Decisions are made without secrets and deception. Step 4, impartiality and unbiased decision-making. Decisions are based on relevance and data. All right, to practice procedural justice in your daily work, use the LEAD framework, LEED. That is listen, explain, equity, and dignity. Listen, obviously, everyone's telling their story. Explain your actions. Equity, fair decisions. And dignity, treating people with respect. Okay, do know that practicing procedural justice minimizes tension and potential violence in law enforcement encounters with the public. The 3 main roles discussed earlier in the chapter, supporter, stabilizer, and enforcer, all employ procedural justice. A key component of procedural justice is the concept of police legitimacy. This will be on the test 100%. Police legitimacy happens when the community views law enforcement as fair, morally obligated to administer the law, and has a legitimate authority of power. So make sure you know the definition because they'll probably use this question a couple times in the test. All right. Know that a positive perception of law enforcement helps build and maintain the public's trust. Know this here, that research shows that police legitimacy is more effective at stopping crime than traditional deterrence, such as fines or prison sentences. All right. When the public does not have confidence in law enforcement, there may be negative consequences. For example, if they don't trust law enforcement, they're less likely to report crimes. Now we're moving into ethics. Ethics are the standard of conduct based on the principles of right and wrong defined by society. Ethics dictate how a person should behave, and laws and rules are derived from ethics. So I could see 3 questions coming from that one paragraph that I just read. So make sure you study that pretty well there. Okay, some steps you could do is being honest in your work, refusing to accept or offer gratuities, preserving evidence, true and impartial testimony, obeying all the laws and regulations, protecting the civil rights of everyone, respecting confidential and privileged communication, speaking up if you see your fellow officers acting unethically. That list right there, they'll probably make a couple questions out of that by kind of saying, hey, which one will help you, be more ethical. They're pretty obvious. You'll use reason and deduction. I wouldn't recommend memorizing them. Just have read them and know them. You do have a duty to intervene if you see another officer or officers committing an offense, treating a community member with disrespect, or engaging in any behavior that would be deemed unethical. Every action you take as a law enforcement officer, both on and off duty, should reflect ethical behavior. Okay, your community will look to you to advocate for the highest ethical standards at every level and all times. So be prepared for those to be test questions. Let's see here what else is important. Influences on ethical problem solving. Just know that you'll have challenges in your personal life, financial issues. Don't let those sway your ethics here. You have the Law Enforcement Code of Ethics, and you have the Law Enforcement Oath of Honor. So know what they are. Read through them a couple times. Obviously, there's a lot of material here. I have yet to see a test that will actually pull test questions from what these are. They might just say, what is Law Enforcement Code of Ethics, right? And that provides specific principles for law enforcement officers to follow. They might ask it like that. Or they might, what's the shortened version of the Code of Ethics? And then that'll be the Oath of Honor. So I've seen test questions like that, but not actually like having to memorize the Oath of Honor or the Code of Ethics. Your academy might have you memorize those for different reasons, but for the test, shouldn't be too much of a concern. All right. We have never engage in criminal offenses, obviously. Some criminal offenses you might not realize are bribery, perjury, and misuse of your position or authority. So bribery occurs when you accept something for your benefit that influences your professional conduct or decision making. Perjury is the offense of lying in court after taking an oath. Let's see here. Perjury. The Florida statute contains certain standards of conduct. Some of these violations, bunch of perjury, briberies, false reports, not doing your job. All right, now we're going to go into misuse of your position. Never misuse the authority granted to you as a law enforcement officer. The Florida statutes prohibit misuse of your position as a public employee. Examples of misusing your position may include having a family member's traffic ticket dismissed, using your badge to gain unauthorized entry to a concert, or wearing a uniform for the sole purpose of obtaining a discount at a local restaurant. Know those examples. I wouldn't be surprised if all three of those examples are used in the test. Confidential information. So good deal. Dealing in confidential information. Let's see here. Don't gossip. Don't tell family. Don't tell friends. Don't post it on social media. And you can be disciplined by the CGSTC. All right. Conflict of interest is a situation on or off duty in which an officer is in a position to personally benefit from actions or decisions made in their official capacity. For example, you cannot arrest someone and then recommend your family friend who's an attorney. So that's conflict of interest. They're probably going to ask what's the definition of it and what's an example of it. So expect a couple questions from that. Do not engage in any off-duty employment if the position compromises or would reasonably tend to compromise your ability. Know the example, which is a private investigator. You can't be a private investigator and law enforcement officer at the same time. Just know that accepting a gratuity may also present a conflict of interest. So gratuity is a type of conflict of interest, so know that. Gratuity is anything of value intended to benefit the giver more than the receiver. All right, here. Let's see. Sexual misconduct while on duty. They're just saying that it happens a lot. Sexual misconduct can include anything from asking a driver for a date when conducting a traffic stop or having sex on duty. Just know that there's inherent power imbalances between you and the public. Harassment in the workplace. So we start with hostile work environment. There are different types, but all of them involve creating a hostile work environment. Hostile work environment is a workplace that is difficult or uncomfortable to work in because of a harasser's behavior. Know these examples. They probably will be on the test. If someone posts explicit photographs and posters in a break room, other employees might be less likely to use that communal space because they are uncomfortable with the photos. In the work environment, harassment may occur in the form of quid pro quo. It is a Latin phrase that means something for something. An example of quid pro quo harassment is when a supervisor demands sexual favors from an employee in return for for not firing that person. Obviously, the employee thinks they're going to get fired, so they're going to do it. Then we have sexual harassment. It is unwelcome and sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature. So sexual harassment and hostile work environment, they're going to try to trick you up on the test. So hostile work environment is just anything that involves making it basically a hard workplace. Where sexual harassment is sexual favors, verbal or physical conduct, making sexual advances, etc. Just know that it's also a form of discrimination. Some verbal actions would be giving sexual compliments, pressuring someone for dates, ridiculing someone with a sexual message. Nonverbal could be facial gestures, displaying nude photos, inappropriate messages, suggestive body language, brushing up against somebody, touching somebody. Technically, it can include hugging and patting or horseplay. So keep that in mind. Not all of those things are sexual harassment, but they can be taken that way from the supposed, victim here. All right, responses to harassment, obviously training. Victims need to report it. Let's see here. We have the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, the EEOC. Know what that is, know what it stands for. It is the governmental agency that enforces compliance with the Civil Rights Act, Title VII. So know that for the test. I don't think I'd see a test where they say, what is this? And then the answer being Civil Rights Acts. They'll probably just include that in the question. Or they might ask an EEOC, what is the governmental agency that enforces compliance with the Civil Rights Act, Title VII? The answer will be the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Consequences, obviously the CJSDC, it could be from just minor suspension to revoking your certification entirely. All right, now we move into fair and unbiased policing. All right, bias is the unfair treatment and attitude towards a group of people, and it is considered unethical behavior. Unbiased policing, also known as fair and impartial. So know that unbiased is the good one. That is fair and impartial policing. That's a test question right there. It is the equal treatment of any person you stop, question, search, detain, or arrest regardless of the person's race, ethnicity, religion, gender, presentation, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, national origin, homeless status, mental or physical disability, age, or other self-defining characteristics. Just know that you're making decisions based on evidence and data, not your emotions or predetermined ideas. Okay, now we have two different types of bias. We have explicit bias and implicit bias. Explicit means you are aware of it and you're openly either hateful or biased in your decisions. Implicit bias means you have it, you just don't realize you have it, and you do make decisions based on that. Do know that everyone has implicit bias of some kind. How you develop it is images on social media, lack of exposure to diverse groups of people, and other societal factors. All right, let's see here. We have discriminatory practices, stereotyping, prejudice, discrimination. Stereotype is the idea. People with blue eyes are bad. Prejudice is the feeling. I don't like people with blue eyes. Discrimination is the action you're going to take because of that idea and feeling, which is I'm not going to be friends with them. I'm going to do something different because of those type of people. So know these definitions. Stereotyping is judging a group of people who are different from you based on your own or others' opinions or encounters. Prejudice is an unjustified and baseless attitude towards a person because of their membership in a societal group. Discrimination occurs when people choose to act on their prejudices. All right, here, understanding discriminatory or bias-based policing. We're going to get into officer well-being. So stress. Stress includes the physical or emotional reactions to an event or situation. Stress may come from a perceived or a real threat, and it could be physical or mental. Know kind of what stress can do. So negative stress can slow reaction time, make you question your decisions, or cloud your judgment. But do know that not all stress is negative. That could be a test question there. We have the fight, flight, and freeze response. So fight, obviously, prepares to face danger. Flight, the body prepares to get away. And freeze, the body fails to act. Categories of stress. Know these inside and out. They will be on the test, probably multiple questions, and they'll ask it in different ways. So routine stress happens on a daily basis and is a normal part of life. Know the examples as well, because these examples will be on the test. They might just give you an example and say, which level of stress is this, right? So some examples are going to be ordinary stress of doing your job, balancing home and work, and taking care of day-to-day tasks. Acute stress is short-lived and occurs when you experience unexpected changes in your life, such as end of relationship, the death of a family member, or sudden unemployment. Traumatic stress occurs when major events like war, disasters, incidents of assault, or other events when you feel your personal safety or the safety of others are in danger. Most people who experience traumatic stress are able to recover. However, some people might be at risk for developing PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. One thing they'll try to trip on the test is they'll say the death of a family member is what type of stress. You're off the bat are going to think traumatic because for most people they're going to think, oh my god, my dad, my mom, my sibling, family member, that's traumatic. They're going to think trauma. But for the sake of the book, that is considered short-lived, and that is acute stress. So don't get that confused. So when we're talking about traumatic, we're talking about wars, natural disasters, rape, assault, things that are really bad. All right, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is a severe anxiety disorder that develops after experiencing an extremely stressful event such as war, physical violence, or a natural disaster. It can also develop from repeated exposure to stress. One of the symptoms, know that this is a symptom of PTSD, is hypervigilance. It is a sense of always being on guard that can make it difficult to disengage from a stressful situation. So basically, when you have someone with hypervigilance, they're always expecting danger or threat, even if everything's relaxed. Now, the symptoms of PTSD: irritable or aggressive behavior, reckless or self-destructive behavior, problems with concentration, difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, or experiencing restless anxiety. An officer with PTSD may also display symptoms such as depression, anxiety, flashbacks, and recurring nightmares. Traumatic stress has medical consequences. Let's see here. What are those medical consequences? Okay, brain flooded with stress hormones, even when you're not in a stressful situation. These high levels have been linked to illness such as anxiety, increased risk of drug and alcohol addiction, etc. Traumatic stress is a normal part of your job. Effects of stress. While acute and routine stress may not initially appear to be as dangerous as traumatic stress, both can have negative effects on your life if not managed properly. Here are some responses from routine and acute stress, so know these. You can have temporary increase in anxiety, tension, and irritability. Health-related stress responses include headaches, blood pressure changes, and loss of sleep. Obviously, then you have job performance-related stresses, so inconsistent work habits and decreased productivity. All categories of stress can also affect your personal relationships and damage your connections with loved ones. Long-term stress responses may include depression or suicidal thoughts. Okay, so know these. I just went through routine and stress responses, right? What they have. You have health-related, job performance-related, and loved ones. Then we have long-term stress. It can include depression or suicidal thoughts. Failure to address these can result in chronic health problems. So you have health-related problems with routine and acute, and then with long-term stress, you have chronic health problems such as disease, high blood pressure, ulcers, coronary heart disease, etc. Do know that officers have a higher risk of suicide and substance abuse. Reducing stress. Prioritize your health from day one, taking care of your body, your mental health. So some examples are regular physical exercise, sufficient sleep, a diet low in fat, sugar, and caffeine, diet rich in vegetables, fruit, and water, and avoiding alcohol and smoking. Know that staying active outside of your job, such as religious groups, community organizations, sports, being parts of teams, those can reduce your stress. Having a good support system is a good example. All right, resilience, that's on the test. That's a definition word. Resilience is the capacity to effectively cope with stress, trauma, and other serious problems. You can strengthen resilience how? By making your health a priority, seeking help from licensed mental health professionals, and connecting with people in your support group. Okay, assistance programs, there's a long list here. You don't need to memorize the list, but they might use a couple of them. But they probably won't say, which one is this. They'll probably just say, which are resources that'll help solely law enforcement officers. So you have, Badge of Life, Blue Help. Usually the name of it will give it away, right? Blue Help, obviously Blue, law enforcement. Badge of Life, Badge, law enforcement. So it's pretty easy to remember there. You have your normal resources like AAs, NA, Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, suicide, crisis prevention, etc. All right, career longevity. Let's see here. Secondary trauma, also known as vicarious trauma. Know those interchangeably. This will be in the test. It occurs when a person is exposed to the trauma of others and develops physical or mental impacts. So basically, the trauma didn't happen to you, but you witnessed something bad happen. That is secondary/vicarious trauma. Then we have compassion fatigue. It is the emotional exhaustion that comes from helping others on a long-term basis. Know the symptoms: irritation, withdrawal from social situations, and feeling emotionally drained. In the past, it was commonly believed that people should deal with trauma and stress on their own. This was due to the stigma associated with mental health issues. Stigma is a definition word, will be on the test. It is a set of negative and unfair beliefs that a societal or group of people have about something. Law enforcement officers may not seek help because they fear doing so will impact their careers. Make sure you focus on building your personal resilience and taking care of yourself. That can help you cope with secondary trauma and compassion fatigue. So that could be a question there. Do know that this will probably be a test question as well. You do not have to wait until you experience a crisis to seek help. That concludes chapter 1 of the short edition. Before I conclude here, I do want to remind you, go check those tests out. Click on the link in the description of this video. I also posted it under my posts. Click that link. It'll take you 30 seconds, maybe less, to create an account, username, password type deal. And then as soon as you log in, boom, you'll see all the tests for chapter 1, chapter 2, and the other chapters coming shortly. Check them out. See if you like it. Try the short 50 question one. If you like it, then do the big 200 one. I think that will prepare you for the test. It'll help ease your nerves. You'll know what to expect. You know how well you know the material versus just reading it and listening to it and hoping you know it. Those practice tests will actually put pen to paper and show that you know the material. So go check those out. I'm putting that in the description now, and I'll see you guys on the next video.